Okay, guys, hello, welcome. Come in, come in. Thank you for joining us tonight. So, we do have a special show tonight in our education series, just kind of educating voters and school board candidates on some of the specifics of education policy here in North Carolina. But we have bad news tonight. A lot of you have been texting us and trying to get a hold of us to tell us what's going on and ask us what's going on. We don't know, unfortunately. What we do know, though, is that it looks like an eighth grader. It's being reported by News and Observer. An eighth grader has taken his or her own life. Unfortunately, today it's another tragedy. School has just started for us, and it's actually yet another tragedy. And so we just want to, send obviously prayers out to everyone dealing with that. That would be our great teachers, school board, all of those who are trying to deal with the situation. Nancy, and we're bringing on Dr. Oxendine in a minute. Here we are dealing with another.
It's awful. It's tragic. I'm at a loss for words. I hope all the students have support systems at home, friends they can talk to if they need to. I hope the staff is also supported and supporting each other through this time. And it's tragic, really tragic.
Yeah, it's a very bad situation. Last week we had a stabbing and a killing, really, of a child in Onslow County. We still don't have the details of that fully. We're just monitoring the situation right now. So I want to bring on Dr. Olivia Oxendine, who sits on our North Carolina State School Board system. So most of our, folks out here don't know the difference between the state school board and local school board. You're learning, and it is, to be sure, a very, kind of, mixed up. We don't know, right, where one duty ends and one begins. So Dr. Oxendine was appointed by Pat McCrory when he was governor, and she's going to come on here in a minute. Olivia, are you backstage? She's going to come on here in a minute and talk to us about standards, how the state decides what will be in the standards and how that's passed on and kind of passes down into the local school board districts. I think Olivia is having some trouble with her camera being on, but Nancy, what are you hearing in your organization, how difficult it is for folks to understand the standard process?
Well, yeah, I think nationally in every state through No Left Turn in Education, there's been kind of a disconnect between exactly what the state is responsible for and what the local districts are responsible for. And a lot of people want to run for local school boards, which is great. A lot of parents who have woken up and who want to start becoming more involved. But they don't fully understand exactly what the state's role is and how that might have changed over the past several years, and the federal funds coming in through the state and state funds. And so it's just wonderful that Dr. Oxendine agreed to be here with us today. Typically the state board of education is seen in the pink building once a month via Zoom or some such medium. But it's great that she's actually willing to talk to those people running and the parents to try to better understand, okay, how does the state play a role in the local education system?
That's right. So, Dr. Oxendine, tell us a little bit about your background and how long you've been on the board and all that good stuff.
Thank you so much for the invitation. I'm honored to have an opportunity at any time to talk about my role on the North Carolina State Board of Education, more specifically, though, about my life as an educator, because I come to the role of the State Board of Education as I won't give you the number of years. You would probably say, wow, it's time for you to do something else, Olivia. But I have been doing this many, many years. I go back to the early days of the civil rights movement. So I was the first American Indian teacher to be hired in a tiny school system in Robeson County. And that was a tiny school system of Red Springs City District, which no longer exists. When I entered the classroom many, many years ago as a novice teacher of English, high school English, I never dreamt of serving on the State Board of Education. In fact, I probably didn't know it existed.
Exactly.
So the State Board of Education in North Carolina is unique in that we are the only governance group in state government that's mentioned in the state constitution. So that gives us a special role and a special duty. And we take a lot of pride in being mentioned in the 1776 Constitution. And in the very early days of the State Board of Education, it was called a literacy committee. It wasn't called a literacy committee, actually, not a State Board of Education. But the State Board of Education consists of 12 members. 8 members represent regions, and I'm one of those regional representatives. So I represent the Sandhills, which is made up of 12 counties. And then we have 2 ex officio members. That is Dale Falwell and the Lieutenant Governor, Mark Robinson. And then we have 2 at-large members. So that gives us a total of 8 members. 12. I've been on since 2013. Pat McCroy appointed me. I have outlived that appointment. 8 years is your service. I'm on my 9th year. So maybe cats do have 9 lives. We'll see. State Board of Education, the culture of the State Board of Education is one of policy making with a lot of emphasis at the local level, local control, local engagement, local partnering with parents and other groups. So, for instance, standards are set at the state level. The Department of Public Instruction every 5 to 7 years gets together. They study what we're currently doing. They look at the latest research, and then they decide on to what extent standards need to be revised. Now, to the local board members who are in the listening, viewing audience, let me say to you, we have 8 areas of standards. So your first job, your first homework is to learn what areas of instruction do we have standards. We have standards in arts education. We have standards in English language arts. We have standards in computer science. We have standards in career technical education. We have standards in helpful living. Helpful living is made up of 2 categories. That would be physical education and helpful living. English language arts is made up of 4 categories. That is reading, that is writing, that is speaking and listening. And it's also in the area of language. Language entails our grammar standards. Local board members, another piece of information, a homework assignment for you. I'm a college professor, so I love homework. So here it is. If you're already seated on a board, or maybe you haven't been sworn in, I don't know the status, but the first thing you need to do is find out whether your schools are teaching handwriting. Handwriting was enacted in 2013 by the General Assembly. So may ask the question, are we teaching handwriting in K-5?
Do you have a hotline directly to you, Olivia, to report if they are not?
We don't have a hotline, but what we do is an annual report. An annual report comes to the State Board of Education on the status of our standards. So we have the numbers in terms of LEAs that are, for instance, the school districts that are following the general statutes and doing what is in the best interest of students. So ask that question, local board members, and you will probably be pleasantly surprised that most elementary schools are, to a certain extent. Some, principals have different levels of vigor they bring to the standards. So you need to just know that the handwriting is being taught in K-5. Now, when we say handwriting, you may hear it as cursive writing, but handwriting includes cursive writing, but also includes, guess what? Printing, manuscript.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because we have run into lately a lot of handwriting analysts. And so handwriting is a very, very big deal. So I'm glad that you covered that. So here's the question that we get all the time. from either folks running for school board, believe it or not, or parents. And they'll say, well, to what extent, and I'm just throwing this out there, SEL or whatever it is mandated. For instance, the social study standards. What they're asking for or seeming to want to know is the wiggle room between the standards that are set and the curriculum down on the ground. Here's how I'll explain it to them, and then you correct me. Okay, so if let's say a school district, let's say Smith School District, for instance, right? The standards come down for science.
Mm-hmm.
And the Smith School District does not have a curriculum team put together. That means a team of teachers that they already choose in place to write the curriculum or choose it. If they don't have that available, then a third party will come and say, hey, don't worry about it. We'll write it for you. And a lot of times that's where we're seeing the problem, where there's a hole that needs to be filled whenever some school boards aren't prepared. Is that how you understand? Is that how it is?
Well, oftentimes that happens. If you have small school districts that don't have the resources in-house to write curriculum, and see, the writing of the curricula rests with the local, because the State Board of Education doesn't mandate curriculum, and the department doesn't get involved. They do not extend, because that's going back to the culture and the philosophy of the North Carolina public education. So, yes. So sometimes you will find a local board will say, well, maybe we should contract out with X, Y, and Z. And they can come in and streamline it and make it work for us and provide all these additional resources, the additional bells and whistles, and let's go that route. But here is where that does not dispense the local board of its responsibility. You can contract out if you choose to, but that doesn't excuse the local board members of their responsibility to know the standards and to understand curricula. Now, that's a big mission for local board members, because local board members tend to have other parts of their lives going on every day. So devoting 24/7 to learning standards and curricula, that's going beyond the reasonable expectation. But you do have in-house central office staff members who are the experts in terms of writing curricula. So ask questions. Have if you have to have 3-hour meetings back to back on understanding the reading standards or understanding the writing standards, do that so that you are well educated and well versed in knowing the questions to ask. Because just because you pay out money to subcontract your standards doesn't excuse you from being responsible for the curriculum. So it's very important. One of the things that I would recommend a local board members to consider doing and making this a request, passing it as maybe a policy, bringing it forward as a motion, turning it into policy, is to, and I think parents would love this, is at the beginning of the year, principals have the teachers, first grade, second grade, third grade, kindergarten, all the way. It just depends on the level of the school. It's the grade levels, all the way to high school for that matter. What is a third grader? What is my third grader going to learn this year?
Exactly.
What are the concepts? What are the big buckets that third graders are expected to know at the end of the year? And do that for each grade level. I am telling you. And then have a curriculum week. Have 2 or 3 curriculum nights during the month of school. Bring the parents in for Q&A, roundtables, focus group meetings, and it would be the parents unpacking the curriculum in terms of, oh my goodness, I had no idea that third graders learn Celsius versus Fahrenheit in second grade. So the big buckets that are presented and taught during the year. Board members out there, do that.
So the concepts that you're bringing up are really restoring trust between the partnership between principals, teachers, and parents, which is an absolute. We are at a point right now where this isn't healthy, right? There's a lot of mistrust. And so you're talking about having these curriculum fairs, if you will, to enable engaging in that. And I think that that would take a lot of the heat out of some of the rhetoric on both sides with this, just having it all out there. And I know most teachers and principals are quite proud in general of what they're going to be teaching, and they would do anything to get parents more involved. Parent involvement, a lot of times, that's not lacking. You know what I mean? Or it is lacking, right? So having more is
Absolutely. It's transparency. We talk about that word quite frequently in public education, the need for transparency. This is called transparency to the 1,000th degree. And would it be a great PR winner? You better believe it would. As a matter of fact, I'm going to require it of my principal interns as an assignment. I just thought of it the other night. So if they're listening, they can expect it.
Yeah, and pay attention to this. It'll be on the test. So, but school board, if you're running for candidacy out there, this is a great plank in your policy to do that. Nancy and I have talked a lot about, because Nancy is a surgeon and obviously she knows science. I don't, social science person. So for me to come in, right, and write a lesson on science would not be a great idea. So we often talk about Nancy, you hear this all the time, right? How are people selected?
Yeah, that's one thing I like to know, especially now in the current event cycle of the health standards coming up for review and revision, and going out and trying to recruit people from every area of North Carolina to sit on this committee. Exactly what are the qualifications? How do you define expert to advise on these standards, especially, where one could argue, should a physician be on, an advisory board? Is that ever considered as things become more and more technical and information becomes more readily available? That type of thing. Can you give us a short explainer as to how this is done?
I'll give you a thumbnail on it. For instance, if English language arts standards are being up for revision, then the DPI will send out a request for proposals and applications to the field. And typically we have teachers who serve on these panels. They serve to review and do the research, and they also serve, you may have 3 or 4 different committees of educators, but you also have higher education, schools of education professors, and maybe a dean or 2 will also be part of an expert panel. I am as a state board member, I am a firm believer in the research. So I will ask for all the seminal studies on standards, not the trends, not the trendy stuff, but the field of education has a lot of trendy research, but the field of education also has some solid research. So I will ask for the studies. What are the studies saying that in terms of the direction we need to take with English language arts or writing or spelling for that matter, or it could be the field of chemistry for that matter. So I will ask for the research, and now research, having that body of research up front to guide and inform directions and new standards, that is a matter of the internal procedures manual for revising curricula. So knowing, and I would say that to local board members, you have this right, you have the right and I will say the responsibility to also you can ask for additional research at the local level. And that's where, Nancy, that's where at the local level, you could bring in physicians, you could bring in attorneys, you could bring in.
Don't bring in attorneys, Olivia.
Okay. Well, you
can sum up the works.
Then local board members can decide on you could bring in accountants, you could bring in CPAs, you could bring in engineers, especially in the sciences and the maths and so on and so. But at the local level is where I would bring in those kind of specialties.
Yeah, that's a great idea, and a way to get the community involved, community business leaders, businesses, community members of all sorts, to help contribute time to the education of their own, future in that town or community or district. Physicians as well.
Yeah, this is what makes it all very robust and vigorous.
Yeah, to have the community come in and help.
Absolutely. And again, it's going to engender trust in the community. We
Mhm.
need more of that rather than this, acrimony that we see quite a bit. And I
Right.
think that, the candidates that we are supporting, the, folks that are out there that are running on one particular ticket, I think are really into kind of healing wounds. And I think we need to see more of that. I think everybody's ready. But I want to pivot for a second and talk about this. When we talk about discipline policies, that's another one. We've kind of read how, and it's very complex, guys. If you go and you read the general statutes, this is another thing that's outlined in the general statutes. What is kind of handed off from the General Assembly to uh, to you guys to put together policies. Generally, I mean, here's how it works: the law is a General Assembly, the policies are going to be at the state board level, and the rules are going to be developed at the district level. So I read over this 2025 plan that the state board put out, and there was a lot in there about discipline. I get confused about, you know, what level trumps which level. For instance, you guys have a goal to get suspensions, I think out of school expulsions, I believe, down by a certain percentage.
Mhm.
How tightly must a district comport to those type of prescriptive measures you require?
Well, think about that as an aspirational goal. And we hope the aspirational goal and the message behind it will catch hold at the local level and cause local board members and principals and the superintendent and groups of families and parents to come together. Again, it is all about collaboration and partnering and deep, deep discussions about something like, what do we want in terms of appropriate conduct from our seventh grade students? And hopefully, looking at, we have tons of data. We have lots of it. We have more data than I could have ever imagined when I began teaching many years ago. So you look at your in-school suspension data, you look at your referral data from teachers, you look at your out of school, your expulsion, and you say, you know what can we do to put a lid on this so that we can get to the state board's aspirational goal of whatever it might be? I'd have to go back and refresh myself on that goal. But it all unfolds, as they say, it all of the devil is in the details. Pardon my use of maybe not the most appropriate language, but that's where all of it happens. All power is at the local level. So go for it, local board members. You're in a position to do incredible things in terms of improving the education of kids in your district, in your counties. Yeah. So
Great.
aspirational at the state level, and really getting that message out. We know you can. If you need the resources, we will find additional resources. But we want those kids who are constantly down the hall and in school suspension and they're missing the math lesson. We want them in the classroom, because that coordinator of in school suspension usually is not an expert in all content. So that kid is in there for 3 days in a row. That kid has missed not just 3 days of instruction, but probably 9.
Well,
I think that way.
yeah, I mean, we know what happens when school closes. We are seeing the learning loss here. We get that. So the last thing I want to ask you is this. If there was ever a softball question, this is it. Are you ready?
I'll probably miss it.
Don't miss this one. All right. So Treasurer Dale Falwell was on a couple of weeks ago. Maybe it was even a couple of months ago now, and he was gracious enough to come on and really gave us a good education and kind of talked about what he would like to see for the board. And one of his, I mean, he's a transparency guy. That's the thing about with Dale that I love. But he wants to see the state board meetings open to the public, just like and open to public comment, just like regular school board meetings are. What are your thoughts on that?
I know the value of that. Is it possible? Of course it is. Would it take a law? I don't think so. It would probably just take a lot of discussion among the board members, a lot of agreement on the board members, and it would have to really be structured pretty I don't know, we could go 3 days with public comment. So we would have to give it some thought, and then give some thought around structuring, how to structure that. Now, you could think of something like, don't ask me questions because I get very inventive. You could think of maybe focus group meetings led by, my board members are going to say, be quiet, Olivia. Focus group meetings in regions. How about that? Where the citizens and parents and others have time to talk to board members. That would be an idea.
Oh, maybe open roundtables.
Yeah.
Catered. I'm joking.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because that kind of points to this summer, some of the proposed legislation. I don't think it made out of committee, or it went immediately back to committee, with electing the school board as opposed to appointing it, because then they may be more responsive to those parents and constituents within their regional locations, kind of like what you were saying with meeting with, people from their regions. So that's kind of along, potentially the same lines as that proposal.
Yeah, it's a little bit of that. I attended a national convention of state board members several years ago, and there is it's eclectic in terms of how state board members come together around the nation. Some states have half and half are appointed, half are elected. Some are like North Carolina, all elected. Some are all elected. I mean, North Carolina is appointed. And some are, you have a combination of approaches. The main thing you want to do is you don't want to get in a situation where at the state level it becomes hyper political.
Right.
We are right now, the way it's done in North Carolina is the board, whoever is in charge of the governor's mansion has the right and the responsibility, the duty to name state board members. So right now, in 2013, the Republicans we were in the majority, and now we are not in the majority. But I'm telling you, we still come together on issues. I mean, we go at it too. We have good debate. We're very honest and candid with each other. Olivia's very outspoken on many issues. But at the end of the day, we look at each other and do a thumbs up. That's what you got to do.
That's good. And actually, I have to commend you for coming on, because we've been pretty critical of, at least one of your board members for, in our eyes, being pretty, hostile to certain parents, if they're particular, color, whatever, in the past, and some things that have been written. And I know that you probably didn't know what to expect coming on here with us. I mean, look, when we have a definite point of view, there's no doubt about it. And so we've been very outspoken in what we agree with, don't agree with. And we've actually had invited people on the show that, I mean, we don't share that point of view. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, when we're talking about how the machine works, I think we need a lot more discussion about that, so that people can make more informed decisions when they are doing a critique. Because if you don't know how the system works,
right.
And I'm going to give you for instance, we've had a lot of well-meaning parents just go and rail at the school board. Definitely a place for that in some instances, depending. But if you don't know where some of these issues originate and what the mandates are, and as you pointed out, some of these things are in the General Assembly and have been legislated, then you might be aiming the critique in the wrong direction, if you know what I mean.
Absolutely. And you know what? The more we talk and the more we have tough discussions, but sincere discussions, and it comes down to that student. And it comes down, in my mind, to that student who is not reading on grade level and hasn't ever experienced that. I mean, think about it. That's pretty traumatic, isn't it? Never experienced how to read. So as long as we are understanding the issues and we're figuring it out and we're having aha moments, and that's going to take some of the cynicism, and it's going to take some of the emotion out of the discussion so that we can move on to more important problem solving. We have far too many kids in North Carolina, local board members out there who can't read.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, they're Native Americans. So I have a special duty. I'm there to represent every color creed, but I can't help but think about historically how the Native American child has not been where he or she needs to be reading. So talk it up, go at it, but come down on the side of what's in the best interest of your kids in your counties.
By the way, number one suicide risk in youth, Native American population. And so we need to be very mindful of that. And, instead of developing specialty and niche suicide prevention programs for certain populations that don't really exist and aren't prevalent, we need to really address the issues for the people that are hurting the most. So with that, Olivia, I'm going to thank you. Nancy, you and I are going to stay on. I mean, again, these conversations mean so much because you're really able to, level set for us.
Thank you. And let me say this to the board, the local board members out there, don't hesitate to ask a question.
Yeah, I think it's really important to stress the communication between parents, local school board, and state school board, and have it go back and forth, from one direction to the next. And it's great, Dr. Oxendine, that you're willing to come on and talk to the parents and talk directly to the school board candidates. And
oh, it's my pleasure.
Because again, like there's a huge amount of mystery. Unfortunately, even state legislators have admitted in K through 12 committees that they don't know who's on the State Board of Education. So
kind of scary.
It's great, to be proactive and to come out and speak and know that there are wonderful people out there advocating for the best for our North Carolina kids.
Well, I'm very honored to be with you tonight, and I'm very honored to serve on the North Carolina State Board of Education.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Oxendine.
Thank you.
Okay. So Nancy, I think the one thing that came up here, well, first of all, I'm glad she came on. She probably didn't know what to expect. Because again, I mean, we're outspoken.
Yeah.
We're passionate about these issues. I mean, and the one issue that, I've talked about a lot, and I really want to give us credit here. First ones to bring up social emotional learning and the problem therein. Mm-hmm. Some of the first to bring up, I'll never forget when we had James on here, James Lindsay, and the look on his face when we're showing him what social emotional learning is. He was like, wait, what?
Yeah.
This happens? And now he's the really the key opinion leader in this area. So, but when we look at social emotional learning, so Dr. Oxendine said, okay, it's at a local level.
Yeah.
And we've been telling people that it's mandated from the state. We're going to explain that a little bit more.
Yeah, no, she did definitely emphasize the local level. And I think she's right. I mean, and we're seeing it as parents increasingly and taxpayers are waking up and saying, wait a minute, where is my money going? And realizing that they aren't really being proactively told, what is my child learning? And so they go and start investigating for themselves and find these curriculums and ask more questions and start getting more and more involved. And that can definitely change, the outlook of your local schools. You start getting, more involved parents. If the communities do what Dr. Oxendine recommended, like go out, find your local physicians to comment on, what your son's curriculum is. Find your accountants to come in and say, hey, what kind of stats class can we run? I think that's an amazing idea. And I think a community can really come together to make an amazing educational experience for the kids in that community. But at the same time, I think there are things that the state mandates, like SEL, like she said, these different areas for the standards that come down that you do have to figure out at the local level. Okay, how are we going to use this to the benefit of our kids, and what is it that we don't want for our kids, and how do we discuss that with the state board and make them aware that some of these issues might be problematic for us?
Yeah. So let's unpack this a little bit. Yes, there's federal funding that mandates social emotional learning be taught in every district. We've heard that school boards and then have to give up in the neighborhood of 30% of the funding they get from the state if they do not do the social emotional learning. Again, in all 12 academic subjects, it cuts two ways, Nancy. So not only do the school districts have to pay for doing all this curriculum that's not SEL, they also have to pay for this now, right? And so I think that's where we get into the problem where they just pull crap off the internet and say, okay, I'll throw this in math, and it's something heinous, right? And then parents or investigators like us get a hold of it and say, what the hell's going on? So that's one thing. Another thing is we do have a small percentage of teachers that are bad actors, like 10%, who are going to say, oh, I can teach this transgender grooming bull crap under the aegis of social emotional learning.
Well, plus you have the state actor of the NCDPI formally recommending CASEL, which has a long history of being questionable. The Collaborative Association of SEL, or how, Merrick Garland's son-in-law worked for, founded Panorama, which works with CASEL, that had a huge transformative SEL bent that incorporated CRT and gender ideologies and all of this identity politics. And this has been the formal recommendation from the NCDPI.
It's a mandate.
Right. And so, I mean, you could make the argument, well, you can always go in and change it in your school board and find a different program. But in reality, like Dr. Oxendine said, these people are trying, could potentially spend 24/7 just on deconstructing the standards. How much time do they really have to go and research everything outside of what, our state bureaucracy is potentially recommending? I mean, the default is going to be, okay, this is what they recommend, so let's go with it. And so just even convenience of what the state offers could be a huge influence on local entities.
Yeah, definitely. And then here's another place that the radicalization happens from the top down is that, let's stick on this SEL thing. The DPI is responsible for training teachers to an extent. And we've seen a couple of trainings that have been offered, awful trainings that are the worst CRT crap we've ever seen, being run at the state level. And our complaint is, and will remain, when we discover it, it's wallpapered over. And it's like, oh my God, look at Sloan and Nancy, they're nuts. Yeah, no, we're not. We're pointing out exactly what's going on.
Yeah, I agree. The accountability question. I mean, even if you say, for example, I remember last year I found a English language arts professional development webinar that the NCDPI did, and it compared Catcher in the Rye to a book, I'm Not Your Perfect Mexican Daughter, which is full of stereotypes and sexual.
It's out now racist and pornography, and
violence. And they specifically said, oh, what's the difference between the two? And the one person said something like, well, Catcher in the Rye is about a white man. Like the whole emphasis was this identity politics and kind of a dumbing down of what literature is supposed to bring to children, and exposing that. And, they took it off. It's no longer available, but the people involved are still working. You have no idea. There's a black box. Were they held accountable at all? Like, what are their training sessions like now? What are, it's great, that the training's gone, or, but then the question is, okay, DPI, what are the next steps to fix
scrub the website?
Fix how this happened in the first place. Like how, so, and that goes to the trust that I think Dr. Oxendine was talking about. Like, it's great that you took down this training because someone questioned it and you realized it was not up to the standards that kids deserve or teachers deserve. But okay, what are the steps to deal with this problem where people are inserting their personal ideologies and identity politics on these young minds? Like, how do you go forward? What happened to the people that did that professional development?
They paid them a ton of money.
Yeah.
For these people, guys, we're talking about you can't make this up. CRT, teaching how to deconstruct your whiteness to disabled preschoolers.
Oh, yeah.
these two master trainers get what, in the neighborhood of $65,000 a year for this? Is that right?
Well, the people from the entity, the Early Learning Network entity, which is the collaboration with the NCDPI and UNC, were making $113,000 a year through that contract, which the NCDPI oversees. The two people on the video, the training video that we were able to record off the website before it was all pulled down, ended up, I think, going viral through Libs of TikTok. And there are two people on that video, and the contract, the Amendment 7 contract for that grant, they are each paid something like $110,000 or $113,000 a year.
We're in the wrong field. Yeah. Totally the wrong field. And so there are a number of ways that this still comes down from the state, but you just got from the state board. The state board's view is that it should be collaborative, et cetera, and all that. Then the DPI gets involved. That's our entire point. And they write these standards that are, take social studies, for instance. They're so prescriptive that they require a specialty curriculum. In other words, they made no rhyme or reason, as the Fordham Institute pointed out, that they were so ass backwards. They'd never seen anything like it. It wasn't chronological, wasn't this, wasn't that. So it's so niche in its awfulness that, guess what? These third-party providers come in, and maybe they worked to help create the standards. That's what we're looking at. And they come in and say, hey, I got just the right screwed up thing that would be curriculum for you. And that's what happens. And then the teacher training. So the state board, their intent, Nancy, and I've always argued this, they don't have a lot of control. And you just heard it from Olivia. They don't have the control. The control comes at the DPI. The problem is that the verbiage from Catherine Truitt and those of the DPI is identical to state board, in that they're saying, hey, these are aspirations, we're setting this up, but it's the DPI who trains the teachers. It's the DPI who develops the, Yeah,
and I think, again, that, again, if you can develop a community of people at your local district, which starts with brave people running with good intentions for the school board and common sense ideas, and incorporate, trustworthy community members who can bring in their ideas and at the same time oversee and recognize when something's a problem, then you can build, trust, have those curriculum nights. A lot of parents, when they email, say they email the superintendent or they email a principal, hey, what are the sex ed curriculums in my kid's school now that they're becoming more aware about comprehensive sex ed? A lot of times the email back is just, well, it's a curriculum that's in line with the North Carolina state standards. That's like all they get. There's no interest in developing sorry, I can't speak tonight, in communicating with each other and going into detail about what their kids are learning. And I think Olivia is right. Like, you got to return to these curriculum nights and start getting parents more interested, where they don't have to work so hard to get answers to their questions.
Yeah. Because we're going to have to develop some sort of way to take the temperature down. We've got to hold people accountable, no question, but at the right level.
Right.
So there's a lot of finger pointing, but I'm telling you guys, it happens at the state, all the actions at the DPI. It really is, because you've got the intent, as Olivia said, and I believe her, is, these are the best practices, et cetera. And the people who are responsible for writing the standards happen to be, and the crosswalk and all that stuff happen to be the DPI. So we're going to keep holding them accountable. And as the elections approach, you need to start asking your school board candidates, what, are you going to do some of these ideas, Nancy, like invite, and I love the idea of inviting professionals in.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, put them on the spot. Say, how would you do this? How would you?
Yeah. And they'd probably be flattered to be involved, and to think back to their days of being in grade school, what they would want to fix with it, and to develop that relationship between the community, because the community should have a vested interest in because they're going to have, your future employees potentially coming from your community.
Oh, yeah.
You want to, the best and the brightest. So I think that's a great idea. Traditional curricula nights, all of that. Do what you can at the local level to get as much
the solution.
interest and solutions as you can. And in the meantime, expose what's going on in the state level, get to know the state Board of Education members, ask your legislator, hey, do you know who they are? Like, do you know what they're up to lately? Do you know their names? So that people know that they're being watched and that the parents are awake.
Right. Exactly. And we are, but again, finding a way to make yourself useful. A lot of times they've said to us a lot, I don't want to go to the school board meeting because I'm spinning my wheels or whatever.
Right.
You find a way for you to plug yourself in that's constructive, maybe on social media. I'm tired of these keyboard warriors that want to complain about everything, right? And there are a lot of people out there in the community that actually want to do something. So this could be volunteering yourself up for this could be a good way to go.
Yeah, offer to go in and help the teachers, give them a lunch break or something. Offer to help. Hey, I want to come watch this next meeting. Can I come? I won't say anything. Develop some relationships, even if you aren't necessarily on the same ideological spectrum, but just so you can get involved and understand how things really work and the different perspectives involved. So you can build that trust in the community, because like Dr. Oxendine said, ultimately it's about the child and creating the best environment for that child.
Yeah, but you've got to find out the basics behind what the levels are and what makes it work. So having these conversations are very important. So tomorrow night, I'm going to be talking to Sean McBriarty. How do I pronounce his name? McBriarty. It's a tough one to pronounce.
Sorry.
Hilarious warrior. You've seen him on Fox News. You've seen him. Yeah, about handling being in this movement. And
he was one of the first. He was one of the first kind of public parents who went public with dealing with the nonsense where they were physically separating him from his twins' school and graduation because he was asking questions about, the white supremacy aspects of the curriculum. And it was really, really awful, the back and forth that he had to experience and go through. And that was the beginning of when a lot of this stuff started to come out. Yeah.
Yeah, he's a pioneer, if you will, a founding father of the movement. So
absolutely.
We'll be talking to him at 8:00 tomorrow night. So tune in and just talking about what's the fine line between, definitely exercising your right, going to school board and really civil disobedience if you have to. The fine line between that and then being just obnoxious. And I think he'll tell you the same thing as we are. Have your facts straight. You're going to the right person for the right thing, and you're escalating it in a way that's not just blowing people up, because I don't think that that's getting us very far when we do things like that. Just kind of, the right person, the right message, etc. You will be surprised at how effective that is. So we'll talk about that tomorrow night. And so thanks, Nancy. Good to see you again.
No, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Oxendine.
Thank you, Dr. Anderson.
Haha. Yeah.
All right. All right, guys. Have a good evening.
All right. Bye.